Hi everybody. I had someone ask to give a longer, more in-depth demonstration of my diagonal parking technique, so here we go. Normally I would start my diagonals up further, but didn't really want to show on camera, so I just shifted it so you can see both the pattern and the stitching, so hopefully it will make sense that way. So yes, like I said before, I stitch in diagonals and I don't really stitch in rows. I sort of stitch from the top corner downwards. Whatever is closest, whatever color makes sense most to me, that's what I do. I try most of all to avoid closing in stitches by doing stitches before I do the ones to the left or above them, because that way it's not as neat, and I'm also more likely to make counting errors and it's harder to pull them out after that. So I just found that this is my preferred way. So we will just give this a start. So often I would start at the top. However, if I do this stitch, then this one would close in this one. So just going to start instead with this color here. So we're starting a new thread here. Sometimes I will have multiple threads of the same color. That's just the way it can work out. As you can see, I have one part here, however, that's so far away that I'm going to just take that and sort of continue it downwards on its own path. So, all right. So we find our starting point right here. Pull that out of the way. And then I'm going to park it in this stitch right here. I'm not going to do it yet because I have that little diamond stitch there, and I don't want to close that in as much as I can. Sometimes when there's an area with a lot of different colors, it's unavoidable, but I do try to avoid it as much as possible. So I'm going to do this V symbol stitch here. And I have a nice shorter little piece that'll work just perfect for these two stitches. So sometimes with this method with multiple threads, you end up with, you know, several shorter pieces after you end them. However, I find there's always a place to use it later, especially in a design that has a lot of colors and a lot of stitches like this one. So that one there. And then going to do that one there. Oop, unthreaded my needle. One hazard of working with shorter pieces. Okay. Now, if I'd been using a long thread, I might have carried it down and parked it here. However, I had a short piece, so I will just end this one off. In this case, I'm going to just do a couple of pin stitches. Since this is a really light color, I don't have to worry about it possibly showing through. If it's a darker color, then I often will just tuck it along finished stitches. I just use a combination of techniques, whatever makes the most sense at the time. Okay, so those two are done. So now I decide what to do next. I often like to work with the parked threads first, but I mean, whatever seems to make the most sense to me is what I end up doing. So this one right here. So I'm going to do these two. And then I'm going to park it over here to the edge. Just kind of move those threads out of my way so I can see what I'm doing. And just park it there. So sometimes the parked threads will travel up, most of the time they travel down. It's just, again, however it happens to work out is what I end up doing. So I often leave the needles on the thread so I don't have to rethread, but I limit myself to about 8. I find if I have more than that, then they tend to tangle, and trying to get the thread free is a big pain. So, oh, I missed the spot. Didn't quite go down in the correct spot. Try that again. Okay. So then park, as I always do, I always park in the same corner. For me, it's the upper right. You can do whatever works for you, but always park in the same spot. That way you don't accidentally mix up your threads. Okay, so I have one parked here. However, if I do those first, it's going to close in these stitches here. So what I'm probably going to do with that is do those and carry it over to the right. So there's a lot of this color, so I will end up with multiple threads either way. So this way I just do it, stays a little neater in the finished product. So this changing colors a lot may seem like it's going to be a lot slower than, say, doing all of one color. However, I found that in the end it's not, because I'm not having to go back and find those few missing stitches that are only, you know, one stitch of a color, and there's like 12 of them. It's 12 different colors, and it's such a big pain. So, and also, again, like I said before, less likely to make counting errors this way. It's more methodical, so this has become my preferred method. I don't always cross the same way. There's a thread coming up here, so I'll tend to pull up here rather than going down, so that it won't be sort of a tug of war between the two threads, because that can make things messy, if I discovered the hard way. And then I will park it again right there. Okay, now we'll do these cornermost stitches. Again, saved a little piece for this bit. A lot of people like to cross each stitch as they go. I don't, unless sometimes I do that if I want the thread to sort of end up at the opposite side. Otherwise, I'm someone who just does the bottom legs of the stitches and then the top legs afterwards. I've always done it that way, and I find it pretty neat, so I don't bother with crossing each X as I go. But that's completely a matter of personal preference. You can do it however you like. I do try to keep my back neat, but I'm not that concerned about it because nobody's going to see it anyway except for myself. All right, and this is a brighter color, so instead of pin stitching it, I'm going to instead thread it along the back. I've learned to do this by feel so that I don't need to turn my work. So that just slows things down. Okay, so mark these as done. Oh, missed one. And now that we filled in the stitches that were above and beside that stitch that I did before, this number 6, this light pink here, I will now do this stitch and park it again. So sometimes you only do one stitch and then park it, but once sort of you get your rhythm going, it doesn't really slow you down that much, especially since you're not ending off the thread. And if you leave the needle on the thread, then the next time you need it, it's right there waiting for you. So mark that, and then we'll decide what to do next. Okay. So in this case, I'm not going to do separate threads for these as much. Instead, what I'm going to do is I will do the stitch that's parked right there. Okay. So I've done that one. Then I'm going to park it down and to the left. After I do this stitch, once I get to it, I'm going to park it back up here and then carry it on from there. And as you can see, I have another one parked here. I will use that one to do these. So there's a little bit of planning ahead involved, but in the end, it kind of becomes second nature and you don't really have to think that hard about it. And of course, it also depends on how long the thread is. If the thread was only long enough to do 1 or 2 stitches, then of course I would need to add another thread later. So deciding where to park, I don't really have any hard and fast rule, just whatever seems to make the most sense at the time to me. So as you can see, I have another of this color here, so I will be doing that one and then parking it there. This one I will be carrying over to the side. I travel on the back about an inch maximum. I find it'll get stitched over by other ones, so you won't be left with a really long thread that you could catch on something and pull. It'll get anchored. And like I said, I'm not too concerned about my back. It is mostly neat, but if it's not perfectly neat, I don't really mind. As again, nobody's really going to see it but myself. So now, if this were a short one that was only long enough to do 2 stitches, I would do this one and park it here. However, it's longer, so I'm going to find a smaller piece when I come to that stitch there and just join a new thread. So yeah, I'm amazed at how neat some people can keep their back, but decided that was just more stress for me than it was worth. I parked it, it's sort of right on that diagonal line there. Again, I don't follow, pardon me, I don't follow a very sharp straight line. I just go with whatever makes sense at the time. So in this case, I just took the needle off the thread, put it aside, and I'll leave it for the next time when I'm doing the next diagonal. All right, so this is not very long, but we'll squeak what we can out of it. Okay, so you'll get a lot of practice in threading needles, but after a while it becomes pretty quick. And also if you invest in some needles that have larger, longer eyes, that makes the threading that much easier. So now I'm going to also do, after I've done these, I'm going to do these 2 stitches here that are in this corner. This time I'm crossing as I go because I want the thread to be on the right hand side. So I probably have enough for, yeah, a few more, so I'm going to leave that threaded, park it right there, and do the next one. You'll probably also notice I have a grid on my fabric. This is something that I stitched on myself using sulky monofilament thread. It's very, very thin, like a ribbon, and you can't pierce it with the needle, so that way you can just slide it right out when you're done. And you can buy pre-gridded fabric, but I bought a whole bolt before I knew there was such a thing, so I'm going to use it up. So instead I just bought myself some of the sulky thread and gridded it myself. And yes, it takes some time, but I find that it saves me time in the end because it keeps me from making errors and having to rip back, which none of us enjoys doing, right? So I did that one and that one because those are both, again, leftmost, cornermost. They're not going to close in other stitches. Then I park it down there. So I find also if I keep from getting really straight, sharp lines, then you're less likely to get lines in your finished product. I've never had a problem back when I stitched by page, but some people do, so this can sort of help to naturally feather the edge so that it's not stick straight, and then you're not likely to get lines, which we obviously don't want. It's 2 needles. it's just a single stitch. So it does slow you down. However, if I was stitching how I used to before parking when I did cross country, I would leave that stitch till the end and I might even miss it. I actually had a project that I had finished and mounted and everything, and then I discovered that a stitch was missing and it was all glued together, and so there was no way to fix it and I was heartbroken. So that's another reason I like this method of doing it from the corner out, and even if there's only one stitch, just doing it right then. And then that way also you're not left with like an empty gap where you're trying to squeak your needle up through, because that can be a big pain and it's not as neat and all those other reasons. So it's more of a slow and steady. When I did where I did all of one color, it would go really fast at first, but then yes, it was slowed down by me trying to fill it in. So in the end, I ended up preferring it this way. All right, so again, as you can see, I have quite a few threads of this one parked. There's one there, there's one there, there's one down here. So we will just work with what makes sense. Whatever's closest, as we're always trying to keep from wasting thread. And if you leave longer carries on the back, then it's more likely you could get them caught and pull and distort your design, which you don't want. So that's right on the edge. So again, I'm going to unthread it and just leave that one now right parked here for the next diagonal. All right, and this one, if it was longer, I would carry it this far. I carry into the next big square of 10. No further than that, because at that point it's less thread to end it and start it again. However, this is a short piece. It's not going to be enough to reach to those 3 stitches and do them. So at this point, we are just going to end this thread off. Pin stitch here is where you just sort of go between the threads and then back down, and it almost closes up right up around it, and it's very difficult to see it, and then you end up stitching over it anyway. So it's a nice way to secure your threads and make them practically invisible. Okay, so I'm gonna look here, and so at this point, yeah. So what I'm gonna do here is, this one's gonna carry here. I'm gonna add another one and carry it sort of over this way. So, except, you know what? Actually, you're gonna see me change my mind. Realize I can do this one here, and I'm gonna carry this one here. It's not much further than carrying it, say, here. Avoids having another thread unnecessarily, so just do it that way. So there's no real hard and fast rules. It's just whatever makes the most sense at the time. Sometimes I'll even realize I parked it someplace and I'd rather use it somewhere else. I just pull it back to the back and repark it somewhere else. There's no stitching police. So then I've parked that there. So now we're right to the edge of that diagonal. So we're not going to do any more stitches to this one. We're going to leave that for the next section and just carry on here. Now we'll see how long that piece is. This one was already threaded, so okay, there is probably only enough to do these 3 here. We'll see. And then we'll have to start another piece. Oh, I see, I caught this one here, so I'll just pull that taut out of my way so that I don't cause a problem. Yeah, this is too short for me to do any more stitches, so again, I'm just going to secure this. Just pin stitch it. You can also go in the threads that run this way, but I just found it faster to do 2 vertical ones and then tie it off that way. So that is done. So I'm going to leave that because there's a parked thread that's ready to go right here, and this way I can do it and then get it parked in the next section and get it out of my way. So okay, so these here, my magnets, these are called little button magnets that I just found online. You can get them at an office supply store. I got some with a whiteboard. I ordered these off eBay, but they're really nice because they got that edge right there, and you can just wrap your threads around them to keep them out of your way, and of course have your needles stick to them so that they are not just hanging everywhere. Okay. One drawback, of course, is that the ends can get a bit raggedy and harder to thread, so you just have to trim them a little bit. I broke myself of the habit of licking my thread. All right, and again, because this piece is long enough to do all these stitches here, I'm going to carry it this way, and I'll attach probably another short little piece and do that one when I get to that section. Okay. So do those three. Don't want to stitch the into my project. I'm also railroading my stitches, it's called, to keep them neater. You can use a laying tool, but I found it slowed me down. So instead, you just put your needle between the two threads, and that just sort of helps keep them from tangling around each other and twisting, so that they lay side by side nice and flat. Looks nice and neat, gives a little bit better coverage. It's a little slow going at first, but then once you get practice, it becomes second nature. Okay, and again, I'm not going to do that stitch there because it will close in those 3 stitches there. So I'll just park it there. And then, okay, now the next one here is there. However, it's parked down here, and I don't want to do that and close in those stitches. So sometimes you have to go down a bit to get sort of where the clearest is and work your way back up. Again, that's why I don't work in rows. I just work in what makes the most sense to me. So if I did this, again, I could just do this and park it again, or I could just see if I can just go further. But then, see, we have here, you can't always do things in order. Sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. So sometimes you have to do them out of order, or you have to find a way to finagle around it. So what I am going to do instead is what I said I wasn't going to do. I'm going to do this stitch here. And then park it ready for the next one. That way I can do this stitch that is next to it. All right. So, and again, you can see this is a shorter piece. It's probably only enough to do this, and then I can add a new thread for the next. Or sometimes I just do 2 threads. That way you're not crossing back and forth and wasting thread on the back, and it stays neat. And often there's enough stitches that you would have needed to attach another thread anyway, so I just do it ahead of time and keep things neat. It's almost like doing a puzzle, you know? So park that there, do that. So now I can do both these stitches without closing in any other stitches so that it stays neat. Okay. So it's this one here. So as you can see, if you don't have too many, you can just kind of tease it out even while it's still threaded. It saves you the time. Okay, this one is actually not quite, you can see that it actually twisted around itself. So what I do is I pull it up, and I just sort of split them apart and then put the needle between. As it goes back in, it guides them, forces them to stay side by side. And now it's all nice and neat again. And I just sort of hold these threads taut with my fingers. I'm going past them so they don't get pulled back and forth, and you don't want it to get loose. And you can end up with stitches that are sagging and doesn't look very pretty. So parked that there, so that's done. So now I can do this stitch, and I didn't have to do it out of order. Now, in this case, because all these stitches between this one and this are already done, it would leave a fairly long carry at the back. So what I do is, after I put it, I'm actually going to just sort of thread it through a few stitches on the back to tack it down. You don't have to do this, but I just like to help prevent there from being any long carries that can pull later. Especially when you're ironing your piece at the end, you definitely don't want it pulling then. All right, and then do this one that's here in the corner, and then park it right there. Okay, so I've also found people ask how I avoid getting the threads mixed up. Once you've worked with colors a lot, you can memorize. I know exactly what color it is. If I pick up the wrong thread, I'll look at that and immediately know, oh wait, that wasn't the right color. So, and of course, as you always keep it parked in the same corner, you're much less likely to make mistakes. I have parked threads incorrectly before. I'm not perfect, but it helps reduce the number of times that happens. And there, and park that one. And since it's kind of past that line, we'll see. I'll park it there and take a look, and sometimes I'll just take a look what other colors are there. So when I get to this stitch, I will probably do that one and then carry on there. So I may just leave this threaded and do it again. It won't make a perfectly straight line, but I don't really want it to make a perfectly straight line. So that just keeps things from getting all mixed up. So now we're at the point where I might have too many needles on threads. So sometimes I will start a reset. I'll take all the needles off and I'll sort of comb through it with a wide tooth comb to keep them from getting tangled. I've had 1 or 2 times that it knotted and was a pain, but most of the time it is okay. All right, so now we'll park that one right there. And then do this one. So this time it's further to go this way, so I'm going to carry it back up the other way. But again, because we're always along those corner edge bits, it's not going to cause a problem. It's still gonna look nice and neat. So generally I work top down, but sometimes the threads travel up. Again, I just go by what works at the time. So I've done this one and, oh, no, done this one, and then I'm going to do these two. So this one is full of 3 other threads, and it's kind of a pain to get my needle up there without sort of pulling the other threads. So instead, I'm going to go in the opposite direction. There's a thread coming up here, so this way it's pulling in the same direction. And then I'm going to go down, and that keeps them from pulling the others out of place, making them loose and kind of sloppy. And then I'm going to park this. So we're 1, 2, 3 from that grid line. And then that's in the next section. So I just unthread that, tuck it away. And remember, of course, to mark that I parked it there. And then there's another one I'm going to be able to tuck out of the way. I double checked, yeah, the 6 is here, the pink. I know that I have the correct thread that way. Just sort of always double checking that there's 3 above it before the grid line, making sure that I grabbed the correct thread and I'm not mixing myself up. All right. It's there. Because one thing is I find I often park threads based on the other thread. So if I park one wrong, I'm going to park a whole bunch wrong, and that is a big pain that you want to avoid. And that's in the next section again. So I am just going to tuck that away, mark that I've done it, and carry on. Okay, so I hope that that makes it clear. If anybody has any questions, feel free to drop me it in the comments and I will do my best to answer it. And I hope that that all makes sense to you, and enjoy your stitching. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.